The night in Jiri Tenga village is never truly dark. The street lights from the old poles were still lit, although dimly, forming a pale yellow glow on the concrete road that was starting to crack. In this village, life flows slowly like irrigation water that flows through the rice fields on the edge of the hamlet. The residents know each other, greet each other, and have customs that have been going on for decades, including taking turns on night patrols. For generations, the men in the village have kept the village safe by walking around the narrow alley, carrying flashlights, sticks, and spears. Simple musical instruments such as kentongan are used bottles filled with stones. There isn't much that really threatens Jiri Tenga, but patrolling is a symbol of togetherness and looking after each other. That night, about a week before the full moon, a new name appeared on the patrol roster, Mr. Darman, a new resident who had moved into an empty house at the western end of the village not far from the bamboo grove that had long been considered haunted. The house previously belonged to Mba Parman, who died a year ago without heirs. Not many people know where Mr. Darman comes from. He just showed up with a small truck with just a few things: a rattan cupboard, a rolled-up mat, and an old stove set. Middle-aged man, brown skin, calm voice. Her smile was thin but polite. And he always greets everyone who passes by. The little kids call him Mr. Mustache because his mustache is thick and neat like the old characters on the cafe calendar. The RT head, Mr. Siraji, accepted his presence without asking many questions. The important thing is that the ID card is clear. That's what he said at the RT meeting. Besides, a small village like Jiri Tenga has no reason to refuse anyone who wants to live in peace. In the second week of living there, Mr. Darman's name was already on the patrol schedule. The first night he joined, the residents on duty including Mr. Wardo, Mr. Arifin, and Jano welcomed him normally. But there was one thing that immediately felt strange. Mr. Darman did not bring a flashlight, did not bring a stick, but his steps were sure. His eyes were sharp, piercing the darkness. And he knew every turn of the alley as if he had lived in the village for a long time. As they walked down the back streets that were usually chilly and hair-raising, the night felt normal, even peaceful. Mr. Darman often walks at night, doesn't he? Asked Mr. Arifin half-jokingly. I like the night. The night is more honest, he answered in a low but clear voice. No one responded further, but the sentence stuck in their heads. The night was getting late and they sat at the guard post while sipping coffee from a small thermos under Jano. Small talk flowed about fertilizer prices, electricity increases, and children who had started playing with their cell phones too often. Mr. Darman was mostly silent, only occasionally slipping in a sentence that felt like advice. On a quiet night like this, people can hear themselves, he said suddenly. Everyone was silent for a moment. Then Mr. Wardo laughed softly. Wow, that's also philosophical. Pak Darman is suitable to be a Wayang puppeteer. But when the laughter died down, suddenly a strong wind blew from the direction of the bamboo grove. The sound of the leaves was like a whisper. The old gong on the guard post swayed by itself, making a soft tek-tok sound. Jano spontaneously stood up and looked around. Just a normal breeze, he muttered, though his face was tense. Mr. Darman just stared at the garden. His eyes were sharp as if he saw something that others didn't see. There used to be a lot of people staying there, he said quietly, but now many have left. Sir frowned. What do you mean by hitching a ride? Mr. Darman did not answer. He stood up from his seat, patted his dusty trousers, then said, It's getting late. I'll continue my rounds alone. Let the young ones rest. Before the others had time to stop him, he had already stepped into the dark alley on the side of the bamboo grove alone without a flashlight. His steps were quiet, his voice faded along with the sound of crickets. The three remaining people looked at each other. How dare he enter there alone? Even though they say there are often crying sounds at night in that place. Jano whispered. Pak Arifin nodded slowly. Pak Darman's house was also very close to there. Mba Parman had once told a story, once seeing a tall, large shadow in a bamboo tree. They sat silently, No one added to the story. That night felt longer than usual. The next day when the rounds ended and morning began to break, they all went home. But one thing bothered Pak Arifin's mind. He realized that none of them had seen Pak Darman return from his rounds. Morning in Jiri Tenga village came with an odd silence. The sun did rise as usual, shining on the mossy roofs of houses and the small gardens beside the yards. But the atmosphere of last night still lingered in Pak's mind. Arifin. He sat on the porch, lighting a Kretek cigarette while staring at the small path leading to the bamboo garden. His gaze was blank. His wife, Mrs. Murney, appeared from the kitchen carrying a cup of coffee. "Why are you in a daze, sir? Tired from patrolling last night?" Mr. Arifin nodded slowly, but did not answer immediately. He was still thinking about the figure of Mr. Darman who disappeared towards the garden and did not return until morning. Strange, but who could be asked? Even when Jano passed in front of the house that morning, his face also showed the same confusion. "Want to go to the rice fields, Vin?" said Jano quietly. "But last night was really strange, huh?" Mr. Arifin stood up and approached the bamboo fence. "Did you see him come back?" No, Mr. Warto and I waited at the post until past midnight. But he didn't show up. I thought maybe he went straight home. But when I passed in front of his house, the lights were off, quiet like an empty house." Mr. Arifin frowned. Really? After breakfast, their curiosity made them both agree to go to Mr. Darman's house. The house stood a little apart facing the lush bamboo garden. The yard was still dirt, filled with wild grass and old leaves dry. The wooden fence was slightly tilted and the door was half open. The atmosphere around it felt cold. "Mr. Darman, Mr. Arifin called softly while knocking on the door. There was no answer. Jano pulled back the thin curtain from the front window. The house looked empty. A rattan cupboard stood in the corner and an old chair faced the wall. But strangely, there was no bedding, kitchen utensils or signs that the house was actually occupied. "I feel like I've seen this house when it was still empty." "The contents are exactly like this," Jano muttered. They entered slowly. The atmosphere inside felt damp. The wooden walls gave off a musty smell like a house that had not been touched by humans for a long time. "But for the past week, hasn't Mr. Darman lived here?" In the corner of the room, Mr. Arifin saw something. On the floor there was a row of footprints. Bare footprints leading to the back door. But the tracks only went halfway and then disappeared. Just like that. "What does this mean?" Mr. Arifin's voice was soft. Jano turned his body to the back. Could it be that he never slept here? Before Mr. Arifin answered, a voice was heard from outside. The voice of Mr. Suraji, the RT chairman, calling while walking quickly. "V Jano, you guys have been here." They came out and nodded. Mr. Suraji wiped his sweaty forehead. "Earlier, I went to the village hall to ask about the data of new residents. And you know what, Vin? Darman's name is not in the transfer book. Even his domicile certificate is blank." Jano glared. "But during the RT meeting, you yourself said that his ID card was clear." Mr. Suraji shook his head slowly. "Yes, because he gave me an ID card, but I didn't have time to copy it and now the ID card is gone." The three of them stood still. The morning wind blew gently, but it brought an unusual chill. "When I was little," said Mr. Arifin quietly, "Mba Bayut once said, this house before Mba Parman lived here, it used to be visited by spirits. But when Mba Parman lived here, all of that seemed to have disappeared." Jano swallowed. Then after Mba Parman died, who knows who came back. The next night, the patrol schedule was changed. Some residents were reluctant to go through the western route, especially near the bamboo grove. But Pak Arifin was adamant, still following the usual route. This time with Pak Warto and Mas Rico, young villagers who had just returned from traveling. When they passed the back alley, suddenly the lamp on the pole near the grove flickered. As if something was disrupting the electricity flow. Pak Warto whispered, "Do you see that shadow?" Behind the bamboo grove, a figure stood. His sturdy body and thick mustache looked very familiar. Pak Darman called Pak Arifin spontaneously. The shadow did not answer but raised his hand to signal as usual when inviting him to go on a night patrol. But in an instant the figure disappeared. The three of them took a few steps back. But Pak Arifin moved forward slowly. If he was not an ordinary human, why did he join the patrol? Why didn't he bother us from the start? Pak Wardo held his arm. Don't be reckless. Mr. Arifin shook his head. We never asked who he really was. Maybe he just wanted company. That night they decided to go around the entire route. But for the first time their steps were slow and full of caution. Either because of fear or guilt. Because in the middle of the darkness at every intersection it always felt as if someone was watching them. Not threatening, just watching. And strangely the back alley that was usually pitch black that night seemed a little brighter. The air was not too cold and the sound of crickets was not heard as usual. Since that night, the name Mr. Darman became a kind of whisper behind the curtains of residents' houses. No one discussed it openly in stalls or RT meetings. But every time there was a patrol schedule, there would definitely be someone who tried to avoid the western route. But not Mr. Arifin. He was actually enchanted by curiosity. Every night he sat longer at the patrol post, staring at the road towards the bamboo grove. He was no longer afraid. Instead he felt that there was something unfinished. What's wrong with you, sir? Asked Mrs. Murney one evening when she saw her husband lost in thought on the terrace while tidying his shoes. Mr. Arifin sighed. I just thought that he never made me anxious. He even took part in guarding the village. If he's really not human, why doesn't he hurt anyone? Mrs. Murney did not answer, but her expression was worried. These last few nights have been starting to feel different. There was a new kind of silence that felt gripping, as if the village nature was hiding something. On Saturday morning, Mr. Arifin and Jano decided to visit Mba Mardo, the village elder who lives at the southern tip. Mba Mardo is almost 90 years old and his body is frail, but his memory is still sharp like a nail stuck in teak wood. On the veranda of his simple house, Mba Mardo welcomed them while chewing betel. Mrs. Mardo, I want to ask about the house near the bamboo garden. Open it, Mr. Arifin. Be careful. Mba Mardo stared blankly into the distance. Then smiled thinly. The house has history, he said quietly. During the Japanese era, this house was a place to store logistics secretly. Many residents hid there when there was a raid. Mr. Arifin and Jano looked at each other. Did Mr. Parman, who used to live there, ever tell you anything? Asked Jano. Mba Mardo nodded slowly. Parman is the grandson of one of the victims of the incident. Many people went missing and their bodies were never found. Said to be dead, yes, but not buried. His spirit became wandering. Once, a resident saw a man patrolling alone. Thick mustache, slow walking, but steady steps. Thought he was a thief but no one could catch him. After a while, people just kept quiet. If he shows up, let him. Mr. Arifin felt the hair on the back of his neck slowly rise. So there has been such a figure for a long time, he whispered. Mba Mardo nodded, but he didn't appear all the time, only at certain times. Usually when the full moon approaches and the village is off guard, many people are selfish, lazy to patrol, and busy with themselves. That evening, it was Jano, Mr. Wardo, and Mr. Arifin's turn to patrol again. This time they decided to return along the western route. When they reached the back alley, something caught their attention. The lights at Mr. Darman's house, which he said was empty, were on. Hey, the house is on. Who turned it on? Asked Jano. Mr. Wardo swallowed his saliva. Let's check. But before they reached the yard, the figure appeared, standing under an old tree next to the house facing Pak Darman's bamboo garden wearing the same clothes as the first night they went on patrol, a long-sleeved shirt and cloth pants without shoes. This time Mr. Arifin dared to step forward. Mr. Darman, the figure turned his head slowly. His eyes are calm, not scary, not red, not empty, just a pair of eyes that hold fatigue. I'm sorry if I scared you. Her voice sounded so real. Mr. Arifin was silent. His body was shaking but he didn't run. Who are you really? Her voice was soft. Mr. Darman smiled. I used to be a resident here too. My name is not Darman. I used to guard this village, but at that time I was lost. No one is looking, no one knows. Jono and Mr. Warto approached slowly. Their faces were pale. I just want to keep an eye on it one more time. Long silence. Then Mr. Darman lowered his head. But maybe my presence is scary. Then I will go. Mr. Arifin spontaneously shook his head. Don't. You have guarded this village peacefully. You are not a nuisance. You are part of this village. Mr. Darman looked at him for a long time, then smiled like someone who had finally found certainty. The house lights behind them slowly dimmed and then went out. And when they looked back towards the tree, Mr. Darman was no longer there. The next morning the three of them told Mr. Suraji everything. At first, the RT chairman did not immediately believe it. But when they came together to the old house, everything was quieter than usual. Even the grass in the yard looked taller and the layer of dust on the windows looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months. No tracks, no lights, no signs of recent habitation. However, one thing they found at the doorstep. A small, clean, new bamboo gong, as if it had just been hung up. Mr. Suraji took it slowly and said, if he really wants to protect this village, let us respect him. And from that night on they went back to patrolling as usual. But the western route is no longer avoided, in fact it is increasingly used. Some residents even began to feel that the alley was now brighter, and at the guard post a small bamboo gong was hung and guarded well because they knew that someone in the dark was still keeping watch. Days passed quietly as if Jiri Tenga village had made peace with the presence of an invisible figure. The bamboo gong hanging at the guard post has become a new symbol. No one dared to touch it carelessly. Some residents even started to come to the post regularly even though it was not their turn to patrol. Either because they are curious or because they are starting to believe that they are never truly alone. But when the full moon night arrives, which falls on Friday Klawan, everything changes. Since the afternoon, the sky above the village seemed to be hiding something. Clouds hang even though it doesn't rain. The air felt heavier than usual and the sounds of the garden, crickets, night birds slowly faded away. Even the guard dogs didn't bark. They just cowered in the corner of their respective terraces. Mr. Arifin knew that night was different. He had been feeling restless since dusk. At the dining table, Mrs. Murney even looked at her husband anxiously. You don't have to join the patrol tonight, sir. It's like there's something heavy in the air. But Mr. Arifin remains prepared. If I don't come, who will look after them? Tonight I think he will come too. At the guard post, Jono, Mr. Warto, and Mas Rico had gathered. They sat in a row. Each held a flashlight and a bamboo stick. There wasn't much talking. All that could be heard was the ticking of the old wall clock and their own breathing. The clock showed 2:37 minutes when the bamboo gong that had never been hit since it was hung sounded by itself. 3 times, then silence. They looked at each other. Mas Rico, the youngest, stood up holding his stick tightly. Let's follow, Mr. Arifin said in a voice that was almost a whisper. They walked slowly westward. They walked along the empty village streets. The house lights were off as if the village had closed off at the end of the alley. They saw it. The figure of Mr. Darman stood in the middle of the road, but this time his body was a little different. More tired, his face drooped. Mr. Arifin approached Mr. Darman, but as he approached, another shadow appeared behind the figure. Dark, vague figures, standing still, dozens of them, maybe more. All faceless, all staring at them. Jono stepped back. What's that? Who are they? Mr. Darman looked up and his voice was soft, but firm. They are the ones left behind. Mr. Arifin swallowed. Left behind. Back when we were at war, we were captured and never found. Nobody wrote down our names. There is no prayer. There are no tombstones. Even our family forgot. Suddenly the sky changed. The wind was blowing hard. Leaves were flying. Mist was descending quickly from the direction of the bamboo grove, covering the road. Mr. Darman looked at Mr. Arifin. We are waiting for someone who can see, who can hear. Mr. Arifin was shaking. I'm just an ordinary person, but you heard us. In an instant the sound of the gong was heard again. But this time not from the guard post. The sound of the gong could be heard from various corners of the village, from small streets, from near old wells, from uninhabited yards. It was like dozens of people were hitting the gong at the same time, not loudly, but with a uniform rhythm. At that moment, Mr. Darman's body began to fade. His figure was still standing, but it was getting fainter. The other shadows behind him also began to slowly disappear one by one. Mr. Arifin stepped forward, holding back tears. Wait, when you leave, who will look after this village? Looking at him softly. That's enough. You and your friends have taken care of us too. Then he turned to Jano and the others. Continue patrolling not only for security, but for togetherness, to see each other and look after each other. Because if you are careless, we may come back not to scare you, but because we are not finished yet. And with a smile, Mr. Darman disappeared like smoke blown away by the wind. The rest of the night was silent, but not a terrifying silence, but a peaceful silence. The next morning something surprised the residents in the village hall. When Mr. Siraji opened an old filing cabinet to look for his residents' birth documents, he found a worn notebook covered in dust. The book contains a list of names, not the names of current residents, but the names of people who disappeared during the occupation, complete with information about not yet found, suspected of being lost in the forest, kidnapped by Japanese troops, and on the last page written by someone's hand. If one day they come back, don't be afraid. Listen to them, help them get home. Underneath a name was written in faded red ink. Darwin bin Sastro, a patrol officer, disappeared in 1944. That day all the residents of Jiri Tenga village gathered. They cleaned the old house near the bamboo grove, put flowers, and lit candles. Then in the evening, the gong at the guard post was sounded simultaneously by all residents as a form of respect. The village returned to normal. After that full moon night, the atmosphere of Jiri Tenga village completely changed. Not because of fear, but because of a new awareness that grew from within. Patrolling is no longer just an obligation to be avoided, but an activity to be welcomed willingly. The residents began to greet each other more warmly. Even young people who were previously reluctant to join the night watch are now starting to show up. Even if it's just accompanying or bringing a thermoscope to the guard post, it's as if their nights now have a new meaning. Not just to protect against thieves, but to protect memories. Mr. Arifin himself still regularly joins the patrol, but every time he passes the West Alley or the post near Mr. Darman's empty house, his steps slow down. He seemed to be waiting, hoping to hear Mr. Darman's voice again. Sometimes he would look at the hanging bamboo gong and say softly, "Is it really calm there, sir?" One afternoon, several residents gathered at the village hall on Mr. Siraji's initiative. On the meeting table lay old files found that day, including a dusty book containing Mr. Darman's name. "In my opinion," said Mr. Siraji, "we need to do something. These names should not be allowed to simply disappear. We made a kind of small warning. A monument or at least a stone with a name written on it." Everyone nodded. Mr. Arifin added, "Especially for Mr. Darman, I think we can give him a place in the corner of the old house. Maybe a small bench and a nameplate. So that posterity knows, he's not just telling stories." The idea was warmly welcomed. Even Mba Marto, who had rarely left the house for a long time, contributed stories about the missing victims he knew before the war ended. A few days later, all the residents worked together to clean the old house near the bamboo garden. They cut the weeds, painted the bamboo fence, and in the corner of the yard they planted a young saw tree, a symbol of remembrance and shade. Under the tree was set up a simple wooden bench with a small plaque that read Darman bin Sastro, the night guard, the guardian of peace. Residents take the time to sit on the bench in the afternoon or after the night patrol. Some even brought a thermoscope and placed it on the bench for a while. As if they knew someone was still accompanying them. On a quiet night, Mr. Arifin was patrolling alone because Jono asked for permission to go home early and Mr. Warto was slightly ill. The wind was blowing cool, the streets were quiet. Only the dim light of the lamps accompanied his steps. As he passed the old house, Mr. Arifin stopped for a moment on a bench under a sapodilla tree. He sat slowly looking at the stars scattered across the dark sky. Then without a sound, the bamboo gong at the end of the post sounded once. Mr. Arifin smiled softly. He didn't look back. He knows. Thank you, Mr. Darman, he muttered, for his care and for the lesson that night. At that moment, the wind blew gently, shaking the leaves of the young saw palm trees. And for a moment the faint scent of tuberose was smelled, even though no one planted those flowers around the house. Mr. Arifin looked at the quiet road in front of the house. There is no one, but he felt he was not alone. Since then, residents have agreed to make Friday Klawan night during the full moon a night of joint patrols with the entire village. Not out of fear, but as a form of respect.